This episode of the Better To podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and DM Needham, author of the Better To Burnout series, which includes her latest releases of Fairy Tales and I Love You and Is Love Just Another High. Hey, Donna from the Better To podcast here. If you've listened to my show, you know that it always sounds great. That's thanks to the guys at Third Ear Audio Productions. Third Ear Audio helps podcasters, broadcasters, musicians, and business owners get their important messages out to their audience. Rich and the Third Ear Audio team are easy to work with. They're efficient and understand that your message is important to you. With quick turnaround and the true caring of your needs, Third Ear Audio is your go-to for any audio message. Reach out to Third Ear Audio at 312-388-5596. Rich and his team will deliver for you. That's 312-388-5596, or you could email them at info@thirdearaudio.com or visit them on the web at www.thirdearaudio.com. Hi, gang. Welcome to the Better To podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Rob Marby. We talk about his movie, The Legend of El Chupacabra, and we talk about filmmaking and the whole process. So stay tuned. So hi, Rob. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Good. So you are a director, but this was something that was a lifelong dream. And it's not that you're just a director. You're a writer, director, producer. You're kind of a triple threat. And you did allow me to watch your movie. And I want to say this because I have had another indie director on. And your production quality, because I also had a television background for a bit, was superb. And I applaud you for that. There was no sound problems. Everything was crisp. Everything was clear. And so from a technical aspect, and I'm not going to say anything else right now, from a technical aspect, it was very good. And it wasn't, because I worked on a low budget TV show back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I know about camera looking really shoddy. This looks like a real deal, like a real cinematic movie.
Yeah, I was fortunate to work with a lot of talented people. And, equipment matters, right? Like, we shot on a red camera, which, is a Hollywood level camera. Put that in the capable hands of our DP, Chris Martin. And I really appreciate that. I felt like it, is when you tell somebody you've made an indie film, and it's like, hey, watch it. I think for a lot of people, it's kind of like, ooh, what am I getting myself into? From a technical standpoint, I think the film holds up to a lot of things that you would see in theaters or on streaming.
I agree. And I understand where you're coming from because I'm an indie author. And I've had people, oh, you're an indie author, but I have a book out that I have gotten the compliment of. I went to sit down for a few minutes to read the book, and next thing I knew, it was dinner time, that I couldn't put the book down. So when you get a compliment, just like the technical aspect, even though you wrote it and everything, there's still that technical component that you want the whole package to look good, as well as the actual movie itself, as far as the script and the characters and everything else.
Yeah, for sure. And sound is such a huge thing, and sound is really hard to get right. And I'll admit that, when I'm on set, I'm probably thinking 80%, what is it going to look like? And hopefully 20%, what is that sound going to be like? And so some people had to work some wizardry, to get us to where we needed to be in terms of sound. But, you can watch a terrible video, and if you can hear what's going on, right, you can follow the story and you'll go along with it. You can have the most beautiful shots in the world, but if you can't hear the audio or understand it, you're not going to keep watching it. So
no,
sound is important.
No, because that's the thing. I mean, yes, we can do subtitles, but then if you're reading subtitles, you're missing the visual.
Yeah.
And subtitles are great. I'm not knocking them, but you want to see the visual too. And sometimes there's a movie, you may recall it. It's a Jennifer Lopez movie, The Cell. The Cell is a beautifully shot movie. Yeah. Beautifully shot movie. The movie's a crap. Yeah. It's a total piece of crap, but visually stunning, yes. Yeah. And I think that's important. So I applaud you for that. So when we talk about this, we have to go back to what, when you were 8 years old and you finally started going, you got the bug because you were helping your dad work on film projects or home movie projects?
Yeah, my dad, he always had an 8 millimeter camera, and eventually was a Super 8 camera. But you know, he was the guy who made the home movies, but he would actually add titles, title sequences to the home movies, and he had a little 8 millimeter editing bay, and he would edit, the film footage together. And so I became very fascinated by that process, from a pretty young age. And my dad could be a grumpy guy, but that was a way for us to bond. And when he was feeling particularly generous, he would let me use the camera and film the things that I wanted to film as a kid, which was just stupid stuff with my friends, but definitely kind of set me on the journey.
What set you on the writing journey? Because I mean, I know you can say sometimes that it all goes hand in hand, but for some people, it's not that case. So, what made you decide also to become a writer at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I making people laugh was an important thing to me. And so, most of the writing and the stories that I did, like I would write my own comic books, and but it was always, to get a laugh. And again, I think that probably, stems from my dad. He could be a very funny guy. And, I knew I could get on his good side if I could make him laugh. And so I think that was, part of the motivation for me. And I just like telling stories, and writing is a way to accomplish that. And so for me, I think that's a big part of it. Trying to entertain people and make them laugh.
I do have a question, and I know it's a kind of an awkward question because you and I are around the same age. Is your dad still around, and has he seen this?
No, unfortunately, he
Sorry.
passed before he was able to see the feature film. He saw some of the shorts that I was doing. I don't know. It was pretty early in my filmmaking journey, and so I don't know that it was the best stuff that I did, but that is something that my siblings, my kids, say my parents would have been very, very proud of the film that I made, and they knew that was something that I always wanted to do.
Well, and I know you had the military background, and I understand, in your bio, you talk about the fact that it really did not go along with your creativity. And I can understand that because it is very regimented. My stepfather, because I wanted to be a bass player when I was high school, he would be like, "You need to join the military, get some backbone in you." And I'm just like, dude,
Yeah,
I'm creative. This is not what I want to do. And so I understand when I read that in your bio, I was like, well, I get that because it's very opposing to who you are at your core.
yeah. Well, I was very much at a point. This was like probably 19 years old. um, Failed out of college, just was directionless, like did not have my shit together, in any way. And my parents were like, look, you need to get it together. And so, I didn't have a ton of options. And so, they kind of pushed me in that direction. Now they wanted me to go into the Air Force. So I was like, oh, Air Force, I'm going into the Army. And I took a bunch of the tests, military tests, the ASVAB, and there's something called the D-Lab, which is a defense language aptitude battery. My dad was a linguist, and he really wanted me, to follow in his footsteps, which would have been, smart. The military will train you for a year in Monterey, California, which is not bad, and sounded all right. But because it was my parents telling me, this is what you should do, I was like, no, I'm going to do something different. And so I chose journalism, and I didn't regret that decision in any way. But I was just a much better journalist than I ever was a soldier.
But isn't that the Gen X way? Kind of going, yeah, you want me to do that? No, I'm not doing that. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I had that independent streak, but didn't have a ton of options either. So it all worked out in the end. But I wasn't somebody who was going to go and have a 20-year career in the military and retire. I was fortunate to make it as long as I did.
So growing up, were you a horror buff, or was that just something you
I
kind of?
was a movie buff, like when I was a little kid, I lived on a military base. I lived in Germany, in a town called Bad Aibling, south of Munich, in Bavaria. Beautiful, beautiful countryside. But on this military base, there was a theater, like just about any military base, and they'd have a Sunday matinee. And my mom would give me $1, and she would send me on my own. Probably often with my younger sister in tow, and we would go and we would watch, all the Disney movies of the '70s, Herbie the Love Bug, and Super Dad, and I remember seeing Willy Wonka, as a kid there in that theater. But that was sort of my escape, but also just a treat.
Yeah.
And like every weekend, I would go and see a movie. So I just had a love for being in a theater and sitting there and watching a movie on the big screen. And so I think that had a lot to do with it. And then I grew up in a time when we had Jason and Freddy, and so many great slasher films. And not your thing, I take it.
I like it. I like comedy of it. I like when it has comedy to it. My I had roommates. Okay, I never saw Nightmare on Elm Street, and I had moved out from my mom, and I'm living with my two roommates, and I come home from work, and I was working at Chuck E. Cheese. Ooh, so I this is when it was cool though. We had the video games, so it was still
Yeah.
cool. So I come home, they pick me up, and they're like, "We're gonna watch this." It was on HBO, and I'm like, "No, we're not." Oh, yes, we are. So they sat on either side of me and they held my hands because I was always doing this. I mean, I would go to the theater. We went and saw The Fly at the theater. And I either turned around and had my hands like this. No, I don't like the stuff.
Yeah.
If it's got comedy, fine. So anyway, because you'll appreciate this. So what they did to me after we watched this, then they went into the kitchen and they taped knives to their fingers, and I had a bedroom door that had slats on it, and they were like running it against the slats, saying,
Oh
"Freddy's coming to
no.
get you." Yeah, and chased me around the house with knives on their fingers. Yeah,
And that was
so
it.
yeah, but I mean, I love the movie House, and the original Fright Night was awesome. So I mean, if it had a little bit of fun to it, I was okay. But
Yeah.
and I mean, Flatliners I like, but it was still, it's not your hardcore. Poltergeist, and it's interesting how setting outside, I think, can affect you. My mom took me to see Poltergeist at the theater, and it was hard for me to watch. And I was scared. And the worst scene all was the face, the infamous face peeling. So then I
Yeah.
watched it broad daylight at my uncle's house. The only thing that bothered me was the face peeling.
Yeah.
Then I went to my dad's house that night, and he had the windows open, and they had trees all around the house, and it started storming. And even though I saw the movie that morning, I could not watch it that night because
Yeah.
you're now you have the trees rattling against the window, which is just like in the movie. So
Well, that's a really scary one, for a kid, because it involves kids, and Carol Ann is the one who gets trapped. And yeah, so I can understand how that one would
I
get you.
mean, I mean, I was in eighth grade at that point, so I wasn't supposed to be the scaredy cat. But I think what happened is when I was about 4 or 5, my parents were in my bedroom when I had a little black and white TV, and they were watching Alfred Hitchcock's hour or whatever. And all I remember, I still remember to this day, of a skeleton sitting up in a coffin, and that did it for me. After that, I've always just been terrified of.
The Crypt Keeper, maybe
Yeah, well,
could
it
that have been
wasn't, but
it?
it wasn't. It wasn't the Crypt Keeper at the time. It was just
Okay.
some kind of. I don't even remember because I was too little. All I remember is seeing that, and it was just like, mm-mm. So
Yeah, my parents, when I was, probably 4 or 5 years old, they would, sit me on the couch with them and watch, whatever scary movie was on TV. And there was one where there were these ghosts who were saying to the characters, "We want you, we want you."
Oh.
And so my parents, put me to bed and then stand outside of my door. Robbie, we want you.
No, no, no,
We
no, no.
want you. Like, what is wrong with you?
I mean, when we
No?
went to the Haunted Mansion in Disney World, because we went when it first opened, we used to go. I was terrified, especially when the ghost would sit on you in the car. It was just like, no, don't. It was like they love to terrorize their little daughter. I don't know why. Even
Yeah.
if we went to pose with a character, my dad's like, yeah, you're gonna get tigeritis. You're gonna get sleepyitis. I'm like, there was never anything normal, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's funny how some people completely embrace it and love horror, and other people just don't want to have anything to do with it.
one of my friends wanted to go see Blair Witch at a midnight showing when it first opened, and I'm like, no, 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 no. Finally, I acquiesced and went with her. And I remember sitting there most of the movie like this, and the only thing I remember was the eyes, just seeing the eyes. But I will say this: the psychological aspect, because you never do see anything in that movie. You never,
Yeah,
because I'm watching it through my hands. But the psychological aspect of it is what gets you. That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
messes with your head.
It's was a brilliant film, and also the marketing campaign for that film. They sort of built the whole lore of the witch, and had a website that people were reading the stories about the Blair Witch, and yeah, very very clever how they marketed that film.
But let's talk about another movie, The Legend of El Chupacabra.
Sure, would love to.
Okay, so what made you decide out of everything that let's do the Chupacabra?
Um, there are a couple of things. For one, it was really important to me to tell a Texas story. So I've lived here in Texas for 30 years. I was born here. Um, and so I wanted to do something that was Texan, and shoot it with a Texas cast and a Texas crew. So that was in my mind, when I made a decision to make the feature film. Um, it actually started as a short film. So it was about 15 pages, I think, and it the idea sort of spawned out of some of the cast that I had worked with before. And so, I was sort of developing the ideas. There's an actor named Sam Pierce. He plays the nerdy hero in the film. And then Jared Donnelly, he plays Sturgis Preston, who's kind of the villain. And so there were a couple of actors that I wanted to write parts for. And I honestly can't say like how did I pick the
Yeah.
Chupacabra? I really don't remember. But I had this idea about this grifter who kind of comes into town and fleeces the town of their money because he's gonna find the Chupacabra, right? And he needs money for his expedition. So that was the first incarnation of the story. And then as I went to write the feature length film, I wrote something that was probably along the lines of Stranger Things. So a sort of sci-fi with some elements of comedy, but it was a pretty straight sort of science fiction horror thing. And it's important to me when I write to get feedback from people. So I solicited a lot of feedback, and I used some peer review sites, and so I got a lot of feedback. And the thing that kept coming back in terms of that feedback was, hey, the best thing about this is the comedy. Like, it's fairly conventional in terms of the story, but the things where you really are leaning into the comedy, that's where it's really working. And so I thought, about all of the films that I've done, and, it was 15, 20 short films, and probably 80% of them are comedies. And I was like, man, they're right. What am I doing?
Yeah.
If I'm going to make my first feature film, I should do the thing that I'm really, what I think the best at. and that's comedy. And so, a couple more rewrites, and I polished it and really just focused on the comedy and the characters and making sure that the story works and that you care about it and you care about the characters, but hopefully there's laughs to be had.
There are laughs to be had, and the stepfather character redeemed himself. So I would give you kudos for that one, because at first you're kind of like, this dude's a little smarmy, and he still stays smarmy, but you do redeem him. So I mean, there's good things there.
He's pretty horrible.
Yeah. So.
That's the character of Roy Dixon, and he's my favorite character in the film. I think a lot of people sort of connect with that character, because I think a lot of us know that character who's just not politically correct and crass and misguided in so many ways, but can also have a heart of gold, right? And have good intentions. And I've known so many people like that, throughout my life. And so I think that was a big part of how that character came to be.
What made you decide to time the Chupacabra to come out during the election cycle?
Well, people who believe in the Chupacabra are also, I think, prone to conspiracy theories. And so, I felt like it made sense to have that element. For better or worse, I think I'm a political junkie, and it matters to me, like the direction of our country.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to sort of play with that, and I wanted to have sort of a shadow government group of global elites play a part in the story. And so setting it around the election cycle, and that also helped. These kids have this experience with the Chupacabra as kids,
mm-hmm.
and there needed to be something to keep the main character kind of connected to the Chupacabra. And so having these sightings and killings happen on a 4-year cycle, with the tied to the election, made sense to me.
It made sense. I'm not faulting you. It was definitely noticeable, and I noticed, yes, right off the bat, you started off with the round table conspiracy, the global elites, and I mean, it wasn't lost to me at all.
That's good to hear, because sometimes it's hard to tell. Like, you want to drop in enough for people to be able to connect the dots, but you don't want to hammer them over the head with something like that either. So I like to hear that you got that right.
But you see, okay, I'm not the average movie watcher, because I will sit there and analyze. I like a movie that's going to make me think. So when you put something in like that, and I have to put pieces together, that makes me happy, because it's like watching The Matrix. Okay, the first time I watched The Matrix, I sat there, not the other one, just the first one. I sat there afterwards going, so is everything here real? I mean, it is, but is it?
Is it?
Just one of those things. So it's like when a movie makes you think and it's not predictable, especially as a writer, and I'm sure because you've written things, when you watch things, it becomes predictable for you. You can figure things out, and you're like, okay. And my husband, he used to be like, how do you know that? And it's like, because this, and this. He couldn't understand it. But when you train your mind as a writer, you start figuring all the stuff out beforehand, and things lose their spark.
Yeah, that's true. It's easy. It's easy to kind of pick it all apart, right, and see all the pieces coming together. And it's hard to try to convince yourself not to overanalyze things, and just enjoy the ride.
The gentleman who, and I'm awful with names in real life, so learning characters' names is Not the best for me either. But when I look at the character who was coming to rescue the town, it's like I felt like he was Antonio Banderas and Crocodile Dundee rolled into one.
That's Jared Donnelly. He will love to hear that.
It just kind of felt like, because he had the whole Antonio Banderas with the ponytail and everything. And then it
Yeah.
was just the whole demeanor of, yeah, I'm so suave. And I got yeah, okay, dude.
Yeah. Another sort of touch point, like when we were discussing the character, Ben Stiller's character from Dodgeball
Mm-hmm.
was another, just I wouldn't say inspiration, but like when we talked about it, it's like, oh, we're going for this vibe. This guy who's, just a complete narcissist and totally oblivious, to what's going on.
And he was. He was. So for you, okay, this was a labor of love, and you've had many incarnations of what you were creating. And finally, when you get to the moment where you're shooting it, you're putting it all together, you have to come up with the financial backing. And you said, in your bio, it's about crowdfunding and family and friends and your own money. And how did you actually get all this together? Because I mean, I remember working on the TV show, which is crazy. We had a woman whose husband was quite wealthy, and she handed me a checkbook of $200,000 and said, "Here, we need to film 6 episodes of the TV show." Okay, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but okay, sure. Fast education, and I did. But so, how
Yeah.
did you come up with that? Because this isn't the same scenario as that.
Yeah. Man, it's hard out there for an indie filmmaker. For me, like this was a bucket list item, right? Like, I just reached a point where I felt like now is the time, for me to live the dream and make a feature film. I made 15, 20 shorts beforehand, and so I really learned the craft of filmmaking. um, I work in technology, and so, for the last 20, 25 years, I've been managing people and managing projects. And, so I think I leveraged that, ability, right, to really put structure around, this anything. Like we weren't, just going out there with our cameras and trying
Right.
to shoot stuff, right? Like there was a lot of logistics and planning, that had to take place. And you don't really think about it, but if you're making a film, you have to break down everything in the script, and they call it a script breakdown, right? But you need to figure out, what are all the costumes that I need, what are all the props that I'm going to need, right? Like, oh, we're shooting in scenes in this location at night 3 times, so that's a shoot day, right? Like you've
Mm-hmm.
got to logistically plan everything to be as efficient as you possibly can. And there were times when we failed and we didn't make our day, which is we didn't get all the footage that we needed to shoot. One day in particular was, we had planned very aggressively and things didn't go according to plan, and we had to come back and essentially reshoot that day. That was probably the worst. But anyway, I hope I've answered your question, but
You
I
did.
think a lot of just my professional experience, and also, being, uh, a Gen Xer, right? I've got some life experience
Yeah.
too, and I put my own money into it, and other people's, people I care about, who believed in me, so I didn't want to screw it up, basically.
And so now you have it's on DVD, but you have a streaming deal. So
I have a distribution deal, and the distributor is working to get it out on streaming. That has been a slower process than I would like. There are a lot of indie filmmakers out there making movies, and trying to get them on platforms like Tubi. I was actually talking with the distributor last week, and they told me, be patient. Tubi is getting 1,000 movies a day. and they can process and onboard like 40 of them.
Wow.
So that just gives you an idea of what the competition is out
Oh, I
there.
get it. Yeah.
And something needs to change. I do feel like I'm releasing this indie film possibly at the worst possible time for an indie filmmaker, because there's so much competition out there. But it is my hope that the quality of the movie will help it to rise above, the other stuff that's just out there.
I would agree. I mean, that's the thing. That's why the first thing I opened with was the quality, because I have talked to other people and the sound was off, or the shot it was not as high quality. And sometimes the quality matters so much more that it stands out more. Have you submitted the film to, you know, festivals?
I have submitted the film to one film festival, and we'll see what happens. It's the horses kind of left the gate, I think, is
Yeah, I get it.
the metaphor. You know what I'm talking
Mhm.
about. It's out there, right? A lot of people plot a strategy of, hey, I'm going to get the film into a bunch of festivals. We'll get the laurels from the festivals. We'll show it on the trailer, and that's what's going to make the film popular. I don't think that's a realistic strategy anymore. I don't begrudge anybody who puts their film in a film festival, but you know, for my film, like, it's very much entertainment. It's intended to make people laugh. Whether it won an award at a film festival, I don't think the audience gives a shit about that. And so and it's expensive to enter film
Oh
festivals,
yeah.
right? Like, it's 50, $100 per festival, and you're only going to get into maybe 10, 15. Like, that investment, it's just not worth it to me. So it's not anything that I pursued. But if I could get into the Austin Film Festival, it's a well-regarded festival that I could drive up from San Antonio and attend, and be a part of it. And that would be cool.
What about South by Southwest?
I would love it, but
I know
the
that's
competition for South by Southwest, and just the timing wasn't right too. Like,
yeah.
that's another thing. You've got a window, right, to submit your film, and that window didn't work out.
Yeah, when I did the TV show, it was back in '98, and we did get the 6 episodes produced, and then we went down to the national television producers and executives thing, and just going there to have representation there. It was 3 of us that went, and our entry fee alone, and this is '98, so it was a lot cheaper. It was close to, I think, $3,000, and that's not counting room, board, hiring the model to walk around.
Yeah.
It was just it was a lot of expense. And did we get picked up? No. But that's the thing. It's like people don't understand. And that was way before we had the expanse of streaming and everything else. So it's like I understand the competition level, because that's why you have people on Spotify and on KDP getting peanuts or pennies, less than a penny, for page reads or plays. And it's the same thing that's eventually going to unfortunately most likely happen in the movie industry as well.
Well, it's already there. Like, Amazon pays, something around a penny an hour viewed
Wow.
for a film, right? Like, no indie filmmaker expects to make anything off of Amazon. Tubi is the place, because it's advertising, video on demand, and that they pay a decent ad revenue for your film. That's where indie filmmakers are tending to make their money right now. But now Tubi is getting overwhelmed with this, indie content. They can't even curate it, right? And so, they probably will become another Netflix, where they start to produce their own content, and only their own content, and indie filmmakers will be looking somewhere else, to try to make a buck. So yeah, I don't want to be negative or discouraging to filmmakers. I feel like I made my movie, regardless of whether I was going to make a dime or not. I had that bucket list item, and I wanted to make, the best movie that I possibly could. And so I invested in myself to do that. But as I look at my next, film, I'm thinking, I can't just keep going in the hole,
Right.
every time I make a movie. Like, how am I going to make back my money on the movie? And it has made me change my thinking. Like, I have a sequel in mind for Chupacabra. It's not a direct sequel. Like, the idea is a story set in the same town of Bluffkin, largely the same cast, and a comedy about alien invasion.
Okay.
So, a little different. I'm doing, like, Stephen King has Derry, right?
Mm.
And he sets a lot of his stories in Derry. So Bluffkin is my Derry. And I want to do this alien invasion story, but that takes a pretty big budget, right? To do something like that. So I'm thinking, for my next project, it'll be something on a smaller scale. I've got a sort of horror mockumentary idea that I'm excited about. But anyway, you can't just keep going and making big budget films. You've really got to think about how you're going to get your money back.
Well, and I was going to say, unless for aliens, unless you're going to do the Ed Wood style, it is going to be expensive. Although that being said, computer animation nowadays is great. And that kind of, there was something that popped in my head a little while ago when you were talking, and the whole fact of AI and deep fakes, because you were talking about the political realm and you're a political junkie. How do you feel about AI in the filmmaking process?
That's a great question. Um, Used properly, it's a great tool. And I didn't use AI on Chupacabra, but for some things related to filmmaking, I definitely make use of AI. I don't think that it will replace filmmakers. Yes, there probably will be AI generated films someday, but I think people sort of yearn for human stories and they want it to be authentic. And so I think AI will have a place in filmmaking, and every filmmaker should start to understand how they can leverage that technology. I can see, from a visual effects standpoint, that there are things that I can do today that even a year ago I would not be able to do,
Oh yeah.
right? So learn to use the tool, but I wouldn't be overly concerned that it's going to completely replace, filmmakers. I just don't think that will
Well, I
happen.
mean, when you look at older films, I mean, there's certain films that hold up still, and then there's certain films that the special effects just do not hold up. And we'll go for old school. Clash of the Titans, the original Clash of the Titans back in the
Yeah.
day, and Jason and the Argonauts. Those weren't meant to hold up to the standards of today because they were shot completely different. But then there's a scene, in one of the first trilogy of Star Wars movies. I can't remember which one, but Anakin is riding around on this creature and he's being thrown around, and the CGI is so bad. It's also like the Mummy Returns with the Rock being the Scorpion King. It's so badly done, or Blade, where they just don't hold up.
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten better than that, but still some of the effects, it's like the Jason and the Argonaut stuff, and those hold up better in Clash of the Titans than the CGI at times.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to go on a rant.
Okay.
And I love Marvel movies and
Mm-hmm.
superhero movies, but I think it's gotten to a point where, when 90% of what you're looking at on screen is a visual effect,
Mm-hmm.
it just becomes this sort of muddy, colorful mess, and takes me out of the story, and that's not true of of everything that Marvel is doing, but I just think that they have become so reliant on everything being a visual effect, that they've lost a lot of the charm of the films. So yeah, a bit too much.
Well, and that's the thing. You need that. You need to be able to tell a story, and it doesn't have to be you. Going back to you need the human element. You don't necessarily need all the big guns and all the big blazes because we want to hear that. We want that human connection. That's what we really want to see, and that's what we really want to be part of. Um, when I look at the one Thor movie I love, and I still love it to this day, is Ragnarok. And the opening of Ragnarok, where he's chained up and he's spinning around, yes, there's some CGI, but just him being chained up and that moment of him turning around, like, wait a second, I'll be right back around. There's a humanity in there, there's comedy in there, but there was a realness. And that's the thing. It's like you could have taken everything out and just had him going around, and we got it because that was real.
Yep.
So out of any kind of, what was your favorite horror movie ever? What's your favorite?
Oh, wow. Of all time, I would probably say The Exorcist.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents again allowed me to see that at a very young age, and it absolutely terrorized me. And so it was a long time before I went back to watch it again. But yeah, just very creepy, unsettling. Um, I think if you asked me this question tomorrow, like I would have a different answer.
Yeah.
But that right now, and you were saying you're not a horror fan. I really, really liked X, which is Ty West with Mia Goth. And then the sequel to that was Pearl. And then there's a third film in the trilogy called Maxine. I just thought they're horror films, but they're also great stories, incredibly well acted. So, for recent films, those are some that I would recommend.
And see, I like Zombieland. I like Shaun of the Dead. So see, your movie was fine for me to watch because I like that aspect. I like it's funny.
But Shaun of the Dead is probably my favorite horror comedy.
Okay.
Yeah. Edgar Wright is a brilliant filmmaker, and that was one of his early films, and it's just hilariously funny and has a great story, and it's
a brilliant cast, and I mean everything worked. Zombieland worked for certain aspects, and I think like Woody Harrelson with the Twinkies, there was a whole thing that he needed those Twinkies. But my late husband, he loved Walking Dead, and I'd be like, okay, I'm going upstairs to write. You can stay down here and watch this. I'm not. Nope, sorry. So yeah,
I watched every episode of Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead.
Z Nation.
Nah.
See, that was kind of a comedy. It had its moments of comedy.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't leave a big impression on me.
I didn't, like I said, that wasn't my thing. That was his thing. So, how did you, when you pitched this to the cast, since you've worked with some of them before, were they all like, okay, yeah, this sounds cool, or were they just kind of like, what are we doing?
They were like, when do we start?
Awesome.
I mean, actors love to be able to practice their craft, and they know what I'm about, and they know what the experience is going to be like when they're on set. Which I won't say try. You got to feed people, right? You've got to make them as comfortable as you possibly can. And people will follow you a long way if they feel like you're taking care of them. So I think for anybody who'd worked with me before, like they understood what the experience was going to be, and so they were just like, yeah, I'm all in, let's go.
Well,
which
and I mean, they trust you. If they've worked with you before, you've built that reputation and there's trust. And I think that's what a lot of people don't discuss as far as the creative process. You have to trust the people you're working with. You have to have a certain level of comfort, because if you don't, there's an inauthentic feel to it.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And that was, I think part of the reason that the movie works is because I'd worked with so many of those people. Like, I wrote to their strengths. I understood, how to get the best, out of them in terms of their performance, and really give them, something that they were going to be excited about. So that was a big advantage, just in terms of, writing something that I knew was going to work.
And the one thing I think that you did well was you gave every character a stake here. They each had a stake in this. Even the one that seemed against it all still had a stake in this eventually. And that brought everybody together in the final outcome. And that's important. That's where you want the hero to win. You want the team to win. And I think you did that. I think you achieved that. And you
Well,
had
thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, story matters, right? Um, you can't just string a bunch of jokes together and think that the audience is going to be entertained. And I talked a bit about the writing process, but the film probably went through 25 drafts. Polishing various aspects of it, always trying to make it better. To make sure that the story is cohesive. That it sort of follows that hero's journey. I believe in. I think structure is really important. And there are some methodologies. I don't know if you're familiar with Save the Cat, but Save the Cat is a popular screenwriting book. Save the Cat is, the title is about making your hero likable, right? So you have them save the cat, and then the audience will like them. But anyway, that's a popular screenwriting structure. I kind of layer those things, over my script, and just assess, how well that story is working. But once you get on set, you can't rewrite the film. Not that hasn't happened,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But as an indie filmmaker,
You don't
you
have
don't
the
want to be
luxury.
out there rewriting your film in the middle of shooting. So it's really important that you spend the time on that story. Like, don't get so excited that you're just going to rush out, and film something that's half baked. Get feedback from people, and make sure that the story is the best that it could possibly be.
And one thing that we didn't talk about, and I don't know that you subscribe to this or prescribe to it, would be the Bible. I mean, for me, I have character Bibles, and I think that's because I worked on the television show. It's like I have everything I need to have for a character. I have their old car. I have their map where their house was. I have pictures of their house. I even their astrological chart. I go hardcore and put all this together because that is for me if I need reference or something to inspire me. And I know we worked on the TV show, we had all these locales, we had everything laid out plus the script. And I think that's something that some people don't really think about, how much work goes into it just beside that little script. Like you were saying, you have to storyboard everything, you have to make your sets. You have to pull permits, because nobody really talks about pulling permits. You have to get all the equipment, like if for the diner scene, if you already have a diner set up, awesome. But like we had to set stages for the kitchen that we were using. So we had to go out and buy equipment. So there's so much that goes into production that I don't think anybody talks about.
It's crazy. Like, why would anybody put themselves through it? I really did wonder that quite frequently. As I was loading up gear, into my car at 5 o'clock in the morning, knowing that I wasn't coming home probably till 3 o'clock in the morning the next day. Like, it takes a crazy amount of dedication. And yes, like, all of those things, it's incredibly complicated. So many things can go wrong, but that experience of being on set with people and making a movie, there is nothing else like it. And, as hard as it is, just about to a person, they would not want to be anywhere else, than on that set making a movie, because it is a special experience. I don't know what it is, because it's so much work. But I think, like everybody gets that opportunity, to do the thing that they absolutely love, and have that experience. And so, yeah, it's a special thing.
I often joke that it was the best summer job I had. We did it for 3 months, and I was the line producer and the caterer and the script supervisor and the extra. I mean, it's like I had all these roles and I was going 24/7. And I remember the cast and the crew is like, okay, now that we're wrapped production, we're all going camping. And I just looked at them like, you go camping, I'm going home to sleep. I ended up sick as a dog. We all got sick because we were all going.
Yeah.
But you know what? When people ask me about that experience, I'm like, it's the best summer job I ever had.
Yeah.
Because even though you're working your ass off, there's still just this empowerment to it that you're creating something from nothing.
Yes. And you love each other like a family, and get very close to people. And then it's like poof.
Yeah.
It's gone.
I know. Yeah. I mean, you build this relationship and you're like, okay, we're all going to stay together and we're all going to do this. And that lasts usually maybe 5-6 months, and then slowly it kind of fades away. And then you run across them and talk to them again. But yeah, it's that camaraderie and that feeling. And it's just, there's so much positive energy, even on your worst days when things go to hell, you still have the other people supporting you, saying we're going to get through.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when do you think you might get it on some streaming platforms?
Boy, that's a great question. I am hoping by July that the film might be out there and available. I will definitely let you know, so you can let your audience know. But who knows? Who knows?
But it is on DVD.
It is on DVD. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Walmart.com, and many other fine online retailers. Yeah, it's funny, this streaming thing. It's just the last thing, Like, I've written the movie, I shot the movie, edited it, had a premiere, got it onto DVD, and now I'm just waiting to get it out on streaming platforms, and it's just the last bit of the mile.
So what was it like to have your premiere?
Oh, it was amazing. There's nothing like sitting in a theater, with an audience, and listening to them laugh at the jokes that you've written, that filmed with your cast, and just to get that feedback and to know, like, oh, when I wrote that joke, it worked. I don't know. That's just like a really, really special experience. So it was absolutely fantastic. And it was, we did it at an independent theater, City Based Cinemas in San Antonio. And we had the red carpet and, photographers, and everybody was dressed, to the nines. And so it was really, really a cool thing. We had another premiere in Austin, because the cast and crew kind of came from San Antonio, Austin. And so a couple of weeks ago, we had the Austin premiere as well, and that was super cool too.
I can imagine.
I'll never get tired of sitting in an audience and watching the movie and listening to people laugh. Like, that's the best thing in the world.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's the compliment to what you've created.
Precisely.
And there's a big thing, because we've talked about that. I'm an author. There's a big thing that, reviews are for readers. They're not for authors. But the fact of the matter is, when you're creating something and you want to connect with somebody emotionally, you want to read that review, because even if I have one review, on my first book. This guy is vile. I admit that. I got a 5-star review. The guy was vile. Okay, whatever. But I had this one woman write. No, I was happy. I mean, it was a great review. First review I
Yeah.
ever got was a 5-star review. I'm like, okay. But then I had this other woman who read this, who was expecting this rock star romance, and it's not that. It's a train wreck of a man who is an addict. But anyway, she writes, "This is very strange. I can't believe I read this." She gives me 3 stars. She's like, "I hated the book." And I'm like, you know what, though? You hated it, but I still got some emotion out of you. So therefore, I did my job. So I re-released the
Yep.
book with a different cover and proper edits. She reads it again. I'm like, why did you buy it again? Tell me, please. But that's the thing. Even though she hated it, it's like you still, that review still made you feel something. And that's, as a creator, that's what we're trying to do, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah, reviews are funny. Before the film even was released on DVD, I got a review from a guy, 1 star. What did he say? A totally useless and worthless film, not worth your time. I'm like, what is this guy doing? Going out and giving horrible reviews to movies that have not even been released yet.
I've seen an author get a review because the person didn't like the genre she wrote in. Didn't read the book, admitted she didn't read the book, but didn't like it because of the genre it was written in. It's like, do you have nothing better to
It sounds
do?
more like a you problem than a
Yeah.
me problem.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, do you have nothing better to do with your time than go online and go, "Oh, I'm going to give you a bad review"? Okay.
this genre is terrible.
Okay.
Don't know why I read it.
But you didn't read it. You even openly said this. So it's just like, okay, whatever. So, and the problem is with reviews, like your guy here, you have no recourse. You can sit there and go to Amazon or Google and say, "Look, this wasn't even out. I don't know where this person." Well, we can't take it down.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but this is just some.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care because he obviously has never seen the movie,
Mhm.
so it's like, okay, whatever. I did have some fans of the film swoop in and provide some good reviews. They'd actually seen it, I think it's at 4.2
Nice,
stars on
nice.
Amazon.
It's a
Yeah, yeah, it's not
it's
bad.
a good movie. I enjoyed it, and it was a nice Sunday afternoon watch. And like I said, you painted a story. You had these. I like the fact that you had them start out as kids. I did. I liked the fact that you had that connection from them from the past, and this loyalty and the blood oath that had no blood. But I like that. I mean, that was the thing. It was like there was this connection and they're interacting, and even though they drifted apart, they ultimately come back together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really enjoyed that. I had something, I think, when I wrote the script, I had something much more sort of grand in mind, just in terms of the adventure that these kids were going to go on. But I just had to tighten it up, more. So you see a lot of that experience that the kids have with the chupacabra, just through the video that the main character watches. But yeah, that was also a sort of nod to the Goonies and a lot of the movies that I loved as a kid about kids,
Mhm.
and so I wanted to have that aspect in it as well.
So, if is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to add?
Um, well, I really appreciate all of the positive feedback that you have about the film.
Mhm.
It makes me feel really good. Um, I feel sometimes when I, come on a podcast and talk about myself and my film, like, what an obnoxious blowhard.
You're fine.
But I do feel like I made a great
You
movie.
did.
And if you like this sort of sci-fi horror comedy genre, and you enjoy sort of retro comedy, raunchy comedy, like this is right up your alley. So seek out the Legend of El Chupacabra. I think that you'll be entertained.
I would agree. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, you bet. It's been a good time.
I always say this because it's true. I had an interesting conversation with Rob. And the fact is, it made me remember the joy of production when I was doing it. Because there's something magical when you can bring something, and it's not just, I mean, even as a writer, I get to do that. And musicians do it too. Anybody that's in the creative arts, we can sit there and create something from nothing, create something and bring it to life. And it's an amazing gift to be able to do that, to be able to take our words, and in his case, take his words and bring it to film. And when you do that and you can see that production, and like he said, sitting in the audience and getting to hear people's reactions, that makes you feel something. It makes you know that you connected and that they have an appreciation for your talent and what you could do. But it's not coming from ego, because here's the thing. The most important thing about that is he gets to hear their laughter. He gets to know that he brought joy to them, to make them happy, to make them laugh, and to spend the afternoon or evening with them. And that is a gift. It's kind of like when people tune in here. And if if you kind of laugh at the joke, or you end up thinking, what the hell is that about? Or you learn something and you never thought of something that way, then I've done my job as a podcaster, because you've learned something. I've connected with you. And when I connect with my guests and I get to talk to them, that's a gift. It's a creative gift, because literally we create this podcast from nothing. Every time a guest comes on here, including Rob, I'm like, do you have any questions for me? And they're like, well, like Rob said, tell me a little about what we're doing. And all I say to them is, it's like you and I go to a coffee shop. We sit down, we talk, and wherever the conversation goes, it goes. So we create something from nothing. And I think we do that every day in our life without us even realizing it, even if you're not a creative person. Because when you're having a conversation with somebody and that thought pops in your head and off you go, well, you weren't planning on talking about that, were you? Not in all cases. But sometimes those are the best conversations we can have. And for the creatives out there, embrace the creativity, embrace where you're wanting to go. As he said, this was a bucket list item. And are you living your life with purpose? Which is kind of off topic, but it's not, because I had a conversation recently with somebody and we talked about life purpose. And she recommended a book. But the interesting thing during this conversation, I thought back to something that my late husband had talked about. And that was at the factory, or the printing company where he worked with his father and his brothers and his brother-in-law, that when somebody would retire from the company, they usually would be gone within 6 months. His dad lasted, I believe, 10 years, because his dad had a purpose. His dad had his wife. His dad had a life that he still wanted to explore. And the problem is, sometimes when we don't have that purpose anymore, we get lost. So create that bucket list, because even that bucket list gives us a purpose. It gives us something to get up to when we have nothing sometimes. If we know that we have a purpose in this life, it makes our life more important to us, because it allows us to chase our dreams, to chase our hopes, and to try and live the best life we can. And I know that was really off from where we were talking about that movie. But when we chase our dreams, we're checking off that bucket list. So on that note, I'd like to thank Rob for coming on the show. I'd like to thank Rich Tsai from Third Ear Audio Productions for doing the sound. And I'd like to thank Fast Susie for the intro and the outro music. But most importantly, I'd like to thank you for tuning in, because you tuning in is why I do this. And it's not that I have tons of followers. I don't. But the people that listen, I do appreciate you. So whenever you're listening whenever you're listening noon, morning, evening, the weekend, whenever you're listening, thank you for tuning in. And wherever you are, I hope you have a great day. And I'll catch you next time. Bye, guys.